All year round, Frontier Home Products and Design has what you need to make your home comfortable and beautiful. Relax on a new timber tech deck designed by Frontier's experts. A new fireplace from Frontier Home Products Fireplace Gallery adds warmth and serenity to any home. Beauty and versatility at Frontier Home Products and Design Center, 4213 Peachtree, 5th next to the Bayfront Highway.
Frontier Home Products and Design Center. Discover a new frontier.
PA contractor number PA039007.
Get paid to drive. Start a new career behind the wheel at the EMTA. If you are looking for a high-paying and rewarding career with full benefits and paid training, stop by or apply online today with the EMTA. Plus, EMTA riders can now enjoy free Wi-Fi on new, clean, and environmentally friendly buses to travel all over Erie County. Visit ridethee.com for more information.
Get on board EMTA. Get on board EMTA. Get on board.
Welcome to TalkErie.com's Joel Natalie Show, Erie, Pennsylvania's daily podcast. Every day, we tackle the biggest issues that the Erie, PA region faces. Stay informed and involved as we advance the narrative of Erie. Now, here's Joel Natalie.
We're glad to welcome back for his October visit, the county executive, Brenton Davis. Busy week here. You've had a lot going on, county executive.
Yeah, we've been super busy. You know, we had some high level visits between the Biden administration, former President Trump. Finishing out the budget. Our budget went down to council today with no tax increase, so a balanced budget. And there's just a lot of things there to unpack. It took 10 months to get us here, but it's a relief to have that down in the hands of council and see what comes out the other end.
I want to talk about the budget in a little bit, but I really would like to kind of, put a bow on Friday, because that was a unique experience to have somebody who's basically a direct, has the ear of the president when it comes to state and local government, and that's who Director Perez is, right?
He's a senior advisor to the president. That's his job, to get out here and shake the bushes and report back. That's a high-level staffer. It's a cabinet-level staffer that does have the ear of the president and out there working on his behalf. So, that was part of a culmination of, all these visits. And I talked about all the meetings we've had with these folks and, that invite in Tampa that we had several months ago where I was like, hey, you need to come up here and you need to see our community, see Erie County, see what we're doing and see what we're doing different than the rest of the country. And, once we sent them the prospectus of kind of the stuff that we'd been doing, they reached out and said, hey, yeah, we're finally coming. So here we are, and it was pretty cool, to be a county executive, to be, the first one to influence and have a president or a president staffer at that level, regardless of party, come here. And if you can show off your community to anyone, we spent 4 hours together, driving around Erie, looking at our investments, driving around the county, give the different folks, the different borough mayors and the town mayors and this Mayor Corey and the RDA and all these folks to get some face time, to really get that one-on-one time that, they never would have gotten an opportunity to do that regardless. So, that's great for our community, great exposure. And we're really going to leverage outside of our weight class, take advantage of the attention that Erie County has on it right now.
I like that we had a conversation and that you were able to talk about things like, physical plant infrastructure investments, but also this conversation about things like the overnight homeless shelter, the Community Resilience Center. And, and when we were talking to him, talking about workforce, again, if you don't have the people behind it, it's really tough to do things, Well,
it's super tough, but I think the thing to look at now is the workforce development challenge that we have of the modern day isn't what it was even 5 years ago pre-COVID. So, the folks you got to look at, we've got the lowest unemployment rate in Erie County and in Pennsylvania and across the nation in history.
Yeah.
You're talking clear back to the early 1900s and beyond when they started tracking this stuff. So when you're at the lowest, and you have less and less folks, the great exodus from the workforce, the silver tsunami, as they call it, these folks that have left the workforce, maybe a little bit premature in some cases, but you've really got to look at your your unengaged folks. It's not your unemployed, it's your underemployed and your unengaged workforce. I mean, that's the single parents that can't afford to get into the workforce because childcare costs too much, so they choose to make it on a single income and probably some welfare, some other SNAP benefits to kind of make ends meet. You've got these folks, new Americans, these folks that come here legally that are looking to better their lives. I mean, you've got folks, previously incarcerated folks that come out of county jails and prisons that, are looking to better their circumstances. So, I mean, you've really got to redefine the processes and kind of how you look at the workforce as a whole to really zone in on one. Employers, I mean, their minds have changed. I mean, years ago, you wouldn't have hired felons to work in some of these jobs, and now they're like, listen, like if you got a pulse, if you're able to, show up on time and meet the needs,
and if you've
I think
done your debt to society,
Yep, and that's something we really need to get beyond. These folks do pay their debt to society. I mean, obviously, there's different challenges with certain crimes and violent crimes and things of that nature, but I think the employers above and beyond have kind of really changed their paradigm because they realize you can't turn away essentially a warm, willing body. I mean, somebody that you even have to train. Mm-hmm. I mean, the tolerances of local employers, where they're willing to train and they're willing to do on-the-job training and they're willing to take these risks on people they wouldn't have 5 and 10, 15 years ago. Right. In the 90s, there's absolutely no way. If you told an employer that they had to train you, they're not even going to look at you.
Well, you kind of started in this 10 years ago with your construction company of like saying, hey, I'm gonna give some skills. I'm going to give an opportunity, but people have to apply themselves.
It's the re-entry. I was just talking about this today, the work that I've done with previously incarcerated folks in my construction business. Some of them have been those most loyal people. They're hardworking. It doesn't always work out, unfortunately, and that's what I tell these business owners. Like, look, you've got to be prepared. Some of these folks backslide. They make poor choices. You've really got to mentor them along. Yeah. You still got to hold them accountable, but there's some great success stories out there, and you can never predict when somebody goes off the rails, but you gotta. I do believe in second chances. I do believe in folks paying their debt to society, and you move on.
Can you talk from your opinion? Because Director Perez was really touting, ARP money and the bipartisan infrastructure money. In fact, he told Mayor Schember, hey, apply for more money. There's like more grants available. Do you feel that those particular programs, which let's face it, came out of a Democratic, Biden administration, have they been a strong trigger for Erie for some growth and for some investment?
There's no question about it. This is. To be clear, it is the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Yeah. It takes two sides, and I think this goes to show what we can accomplish when two sides work together in the legislators, and it's not just one side consistently blocking the other. Mm-hmm. Really the only one at the end of the day, the only people that pay for that are communities. It's the same thing with my budget that I sent down with our American Rescue Plan budget. And we've got $10 million. We've got that allocated for community investment infrastructure projects, which leverage out to, we're taking $10 million and turn it into $43 million returns. When you say
how does that work? Tell me how that ratios work.
So kind of just like you just talked about. Just like Director Perez saying, hey, there's more money available out there. So say, for instance, we give local governments the ability to have essentially a down payment. You have to have a local share for a lot of these grants. So if you apply for, let's say you apply for $1 million grant, they might say, hey, listen, you need at least $200,000 or you need $150,000 in the game. Well, that puts most municipalities right out of the running because some of their budgets are only $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 a year. Right. Where are you going to come up with a 30-year operating cost for?
And they have to buy salt and keep their snowplows going, right?
And pay their folks and maintain. So it's just, here's the thing, and that's what I said. This is leverage funding. When it was controversial 2 years ago, when I came into office, I clawed all that money back, and they're like, this is a travesty. This is going to be a dumpster fire. This is a nightmare. Well, I guess this is I told you so. Mm-hmm. There's a will, there's a way, there's a strategy, and there always has been. And to me, this is that non-negotiable courage that I've been talking about. You have to dare to dream big and leverage outside your weight class. Well, Erie County just got a taste of that today because those results were just delivered to County Council. Now, I mean, what they do with that, that's going to be up to them, you know, but I mean, I don't know how you could rightly, any council member, vote against this.
Let's make it clear of what you presented today. So number one, you were able to say that, what was it, 3.6 mil, something like that, is translating into, what is it? The stuff that's already in play.
We had about $3.6 million that leverage out to, I think, about 17,
right.
just shy of 18 million. So that was the first tranche.
And that's what's on the books. It's all done.
That's our, well, it's not all, it's either completed or it's in progress. So that's money that's already out there from last year's budget. This was that first tranche of that municipal gap fund that we created and, you know, have really touted. So with that $3 million of taxpayer money, we went out there, sought other grants, worked with the townships, worked with our economic development department, worked with our fusion cell, worked with consultants, worked with grant writers, and we utilize that $3 million to come up with that local share that they could never come up with that unlocks other money.
Right.
You know, it's using our money to make money. And this is effectively the greatest tax cut that Erie County has ever seen. You heard it from the director. You're hearing it again from me, because how does that work? So say you're a resident. Let's just use the example out in Green Township. I mean, I sold every property I owned out there after that sewer went in because, I mean, there was very little help. You know, the costs have been super high, which leads to high monthly or quarterly bills.
Sure.
You know, I mean, and when you don't have a ton of people, you know, paying in monthly bills, it takes a long time for that township to make up a $2 or $3 million deficit when you've only got, you know, 3,000 people in a township or less. So how that equates to a tax cut is, say, for instance, let's look at the water that we just brought out there, the Green Township proposed plan, that the water money we just sent out there. We were able to send that $74,000 or whatever that was, that covers the local match. We acquired the rest through grant funding. So that project, you're bringing water out to a township and opportunities for no cost. That's the way all these things should have done that. And that's the argument I've made about gaming revenue and ECRA this entire time I've been in office and even prior. You look at how we've been doing this. We modeled this after how other counties do gaming revenue, straight from the county budget, no overhead, no executive director, no board, no salaries, no office space, no all this extra crap paying for people's PhDs and all this other silliness, travel claims, meals, tens of thousands of dollars on Amazon, you name it. That's not what this stuff is for. If we had been consistently putting points on the board and leveraging investment since 2008 when we voted on this to lower our taxes, because that's what it was supposed to do, and it turned into walking around money for nonprofits and all these other feel-good things.
But I'm sorry to cut you off, but honestly, if you remember what the political tenure was back in 2008, they were so concerned that it would just go into a black hole of trying to make payroll at the courthouse.
Well, I mean, I guess to me they should have read the gaming revenue law a little better, but I mean, this just goes to show, and I mean, to me, I said that even today. You know, there's a lot of folks that don't understand why ECRA is even about, and it was a disagreement. It was a difference of personalities between a former county executive and a chairman of council at the time, and it was one of them throwing the screws at the other. Yeah. You know, and they created this entity. It's the only entity in the state that operates this way. We're the only one, which is why obviously we're in the trouble that we're in. Our gaming revenue authority is under investigation. I mean, it is what it is. But I mean, the underlying point and premise here is, how different would our community look if we had been consistently? So I just showed you what you can do with $10 million. Well, actually $7 million in a year. Yeah. So if you take the $4 million that we have, $4.5 million that comes to county government, the other $4.5 that goes to ECRA, there's $9 million. We could make it rain every single year, leverage that $9 million out to $40 or $50 million in infrastructure. You would literally be begging, borrowing, and stealing, just begging townships to come up with a project. How nice would our streetscapes be? How nice would our downtowns be? And the thing is even if ECRA were to go away, you know, and I'm a big supporter of that. I think it should, because, I mean, that's another 600 and some odd thousand a year. That's three other $250,000 projects that we could leverage out to $2 or $3 million, $4 million, $5 million, whatever we could do. by developing our capital stack. The proof is in the pudding, and I just delivered on that today. So, I mean, to me, the gauntlet's laid. You know, I mean, this is how gaming revenue should be allocated. This just proves exactly how we can do it and do it responsibly, but with zero overhead. That puts every dollar back out in the street and projects, and communities get more.
You know, you presented a budget. What is like the big number of the budget when we're talking here? Like, what did you present to Scatella today?
So you're talking the total ball of wax.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have the number, but it's 600 plus. I mean, I don't remember it right offhand. I think I've
600 million, and a lot of that is in and out, right? A lot of that is state funding, federal funding for things like human services, right?
Yes, I mean, a lot of that's it's about 450 plus is what is like a state and federal pass through. So like our general fund, I mean, that hovers right around 100 plus million.
Okay.
I mean, give or take. I mean, without looking at the figures, I don't memorize them.
Right. I was interested in seeing that there will be no tax increase, but you're having to
there's no proposed tax increase by the county executive. So keep in mind that council gets to do what they do. I mean, if they decide they want to raise taxes, that's on them, but I'll veto it. But
you're needing to actually do some significant reorganization. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, yeah, this has been a long time coming. I mean, I tried this last year. I mean, everybody saw that we tried to do this in a smaller form last year, and the powers that be on council, for whatever reason, just didn't want to reduce jobs, didn't want to vacate these jobs. And what this does is we have a lot of lower-end jobs. I mean, 100-plus vacancies in county government, and a vast majority of those are jobs that we just can't fill. So what we do is we over-budget, you know, because you've got to budget the entire year to make up for all those salaries. So you have 100 vacant positions. You budget all the money to pay for those wages, those benefits, those insurance, and all of that. Because if you hire somebody, you got to be able to pay them. It's got to be in the budget. It's got to be in a line item, or else you can't hire them, and there's no way to compensate them.
So you've been, quote, planning on all these positions,
and we've been doing that,
funding them
for decades. You know, I think the last major right sizing was probably during the Barry Grossman administration. You know, and it's kind of ballooned to the point of where it is now. You know, obviously I inherited Dahlkemper's budget my first year. Mm-hmm. You know, last year was really my first true and inherent budget where I was able to kind of delve into, you know, the nuances of the county budget and kind of start to make it my own. But I mean, there's still some effects from year to year to year. And this year was a year that, I mean, last year was my learning year, and this year I sunk my teeth into it with my folks. And, you know, every year you get better and better because you get a greater understanding of what you can do. You know, we spent a lot of time doing legal research and looking at the pros and cons and the effects of what we would do. You know, obviously there's positions that are vacant, but if they're 100% funded by state and federal money, if you cut them, you're not saving anything. Okay. You know, so you got to be careful. Just cutting something, and that's something we've worked really hard to educate council with this time around with our, you know, educational workshops that we have with them, you know, where they can sit down and learn from DHS folks, learn from our finance folks, say, hey, look, this is how this operates. Like last year, you saw the $1.2 million in adoption services that they cut. Well, that was revenue. That's money coming in, $1.2 million. Like, who would turn away a $1.2 million check? Well, apparently last year's council, you know, and that's how unorthodox. And it's like, listen, you can't expect, and you know, it's nothing against these folks, but you can't expect to know the nuances of something. I do this full time, 365 days a year. I've done it for almost 3 years, and there's still a boatload to learn. You know, and I've got experts with 20 plus years, I mean, throughout my cabinet that help me make these decisions. We make these calculations, and entire departments to guide these decisions. And you know, 2 different law firms, and you name it. I mean, there's a lot of resources at the county executive's fingertips to be able to put together this budget intelligently. And a part-time council doesn't have the people, the resources, or the day-to-day operations. That's not within their wheelhouse to even know that.
Quickfill gasoline is made right here in America. United Refining Company, who operates Quickfill, refines its gasoline from North American crude oil in Warren, Pennsylvania. When you buy United Refining Company gasoline at Quickfill, you keep jobs and businesses in America, and you keep American families strong. You don't need to send your money overseas when you buy gasoline. Buy American-made gasoline at Quickfill. Quickfill, driving America.
From baggage claim to pajamas in 10 minutes. Erie International Airport. Fly with ERI.com.
Fly Erie International Airport to Charlotte on American Airlines, your nonstop gateway to the world. Also, we have Breeze Airways flying nonstop to Orlando and Tampa, Florida. A great low-cost carrier providing excellent service to the regional community. Fly Erie International for your travel needs.
Fly with ERI.com.
County Executive Brenton Davis is with us here. And the big news today is the county budget presented by law, right, on October 1st.
Yep.
Yeah, so, we only have a few county executives in Pennsylvania. Most of the time it's county commissioners giving themselves the budget,
they
right?
operate differently. So I'm one of four.
Right, yeah.
One of four. And the rest are commissioner counties, and they comprise of their own budgets. Three individuals that sit down, and they got to get a vote. Two need to vote one way on these issues. It's kind of I think it's a more functional form of government because those folks are there full time. You have three people running a full time government, but I think the wisdom. I mean, there's wisdom both directions, and we could talk about this, and we have in the past, like. Having an executive mayor and executive strong governments enables us to do the things like you saw today. Mm-hmm. For somebody to really have a vision, make it come to life, and you empower those positions to be able to move faster. Right. But I mean, the irony is a lot of the pushback that we've seen with a lot of these projects is the fact that one person has the ability to implement a particular strategy or to make decisions and move quickly. Well, that's how you outmaneuver other communities. You don't put a star on the court and then handcuff them. Right. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. So, but no, I mean, it's exciting. It's an exciting day. And I think as long as the budget goes through predominantly as it is with no tax increase, I mean, this is the beginning of some really awesome stuff, unprecedented and historic infrastructure investments that we've never seen.
You mentioned at your budget address today strategic reorganizations in key departments. I'm trying to remember if I remember. There's four that you mentioned.
It'd be the library, health department, public safety, and the prison. So these are strategic reorganizations. So what that does is, I mean, these were some of our more problematic areas in terms of, one, the library was overstaffed. In some instances,
and people didn't really know who their boss was.
100%. So I mean,
kind of a deal,
and you need to have. I mean, from an organizational leadership perspective, you got to have that hierarchy. You got to have that chain of command. You got to know, when the number one person's sick, who's your number two, who's your number three, who's your number four, who's your number five. Or else, how do you hold any organization accountable? Things happen.
I was talking to the health director, speaking of public health. She was pretty happy about the reorg and what they're going to be able to save that way.
Well, and the savings is, a part of this is a strategy of these are low-paying jobs. I mean, when I came into office, our bottom dollar was $9.66 an hour for the bottom job. I mean, that's a travesty. And now I've got that closer to $14 an hour, and that's our bottom.
Right.
So, when folks say, leaps and bounds, this is how you improve an organization. This is how you improve things for your employees. This is how you create that upward economic mobility and that opportunity for them to build a career. So instead of things being flat and horizontal in nature, you build out your upper and your middle management a little bit. You create some opportunities for some career development. And that's how you can keep folks within your organization because there's money, there's opportunity, and I think most folks inherently are going to develop themselves to follow that career pathway. But when your chain of command is kind of flat and nondescript, you kind of look around and go, I have nowhere to grow. And that just doesn't work for anybody. So,
tell me about how this works with the reorg and the unions. I'm thinking of the prison. The corrections officers are unionized, right?
It would all be different. So the reorganization doesn't necessarily affect the unions in the prison.
And the contract.
What I did is, I thought we were a little top heavy over there. We had three deputy wardens. And what I did is I promoted our interim warden yesterday. Mike Holman's the new warden official. So now what we're going to have, the proposal in council to be approved is a one deputy warden slot. That would be the solid number 2. The position that our new warden came from, an operations guy, that's going to get distributed amongst 2 other positions. And, that kind of just lightens the burden. It puts a little bit more responsibility, but you can elevate the pay a little bit.
Right.
And, provide some other opportunities down the road. I mean, and this is just one step. You got to fine tune the organization. This isn't the be all end all. You try it, you look at it, you revise, and you refine. I mean, that's what you do. I mean, you can't say, oh, this is great or this is a disaster, whatever it is. You got to give things time, because as the situation develops and you exercise a little patience, you're going to identify areas that are problematic. You remain flexible. You find the solution, or you identify certain pitfalls. You're like, okay, this is maybe a little too problematic. How can we distribute this workload? Or maybe we need to create a lower level position where maybe some of these auxiliary responsibilities fall to somebody and save the taxpayers a little money. But you sweeten the pot for maybe somebody that's in that middle management to kind of step into that
Shift
echelon.
captain or something
100%.
like that,
It gives them an opportunity to develop, or maybe do a little bit of career broadening. So, I mean, that's ultimately what this is about, I mean, it's taking an intelligent look at organizational leadership, and I spent 23 years in the military. I mean, looking through that leadership lens, I mean, this provides those opportunities, but it keeps people's taxes low, and I mean, we've been on a trajectory of ever rising costs in county government. Yeah. So, I mean, anywhere that things that we can do, like this ARPA money, these tax cuts, with these investments out in the infrastructure, keeping the townships' taxes low. So, I mean, if I can help the townships accomplish culvert projects, water, sewer, water tower projects, they're not turning the pockets of the taxpayers out, because we're working together as a government, as it should. And this has never happened in the history of county government. The county government working directly with townships to solve these problems. That's how we keep your taxes low, not only at the county, but at the township level. So we're taking multiple bites, where the government comes and takes a wet bite out of your pocketbook from the township level, the borough level, the county level, and, the school districts. These are ways that we can work with these branches of government to keep taxes low. And that's the way casino gaming revenue should be done. And this is an example of how we would do it if we had all of this casino gaming revenue under the charge of the county.
74 vacant positions. You were saying at the press conference today that they've been long not filled. You're going to save $4.5 million of just not carrying from budget to budget.
So that's 74. So that's not every. So, I mean, we're still going to have probably 30 or 40 vacant positions that we're still going to need the budget for, because obviously you're still going to fill out your organization.
Will you still get to that $4.5 million, you think? Or?
Oh, with the 4.5 with the 74, that's 4.5 automatic.
Okay.
So say, for instance, the 74, if you've got 100 plus vacancies, say we have 30, 40, whatever it is left, the 74 that we cut, if this passes as is in council, that's like a $4.7 million savings. Now, keep in mind, that's just wages. That's this year. So now you got to look at the exponential costs associated with every employee.
Right.
They've got a pension, they've got insurance, they've got medication, they've got health care. We've got long-term pensions. All these things that factor in. And then starting January 1, there's a 4% increase on all those wages. So the savings in the new year would be 4.7 times 4%.
Right. Plus
all those long-term benefits. You keep an employee and roll it on, this cost go and go and go and go and go. Well, you keep doing that with 74 positions. Imagine what that cost is. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. Imagine you have 74 mouths to feed. And then next year it's going to be a little more expensive, a little more expensive, a little more expensive. Your kids grow every year. The clothes become more expensive. It's no different with county employees. It's just the costs grow for different reasons.
Sure. We're talking to the county executive, Brenton Davis. I think we need to do a separate show on the Erie County Resilience Center. It's a $1 million investment, part of this ARP money. But I do want to ask you about how that fits in kind of the new thinking about homelessness here. We have the Build CDC. Again, you've got Hammett, who's involved. There's some major investments. Is this kind of a holistic, everybody's kind of involved in different pieces
100%.
here?
So that was by design. So, I mean, last year, there was the Hammett initiative down here on 2nd Street that they thought they were going to do something, and at the last minute it kind of fell through. So we presented our old worker lease building, which is now the Community Resilience Center.
That's on East 16th?
That's on East 16th.
Yeah.
And, we presented that as an option. They're kind of like, no, we got this. So I was okay, I'll take a step back. Well, when it fell through January this year, I was like drawing a line in the sand and said, nope, not happening again. Like, we stepped in, even though, it's not anywhere in the charter for county government to be responsible for the unhoused. I believe you're responsible for whatever happens or fails to happen in a community. You can't ignore a problem. You have the ability to change it. That's what I ran to do. It's not under my, charge of the Home Rule Charter to take care of the unhoused, but we do provide a vast majority of these social services. We come from a position where we can influence a lot of these systems. So, I just drew a line in the sand and said, we're going to do this, and the audible with the American Rescue Plan money going willy-nilly last year to Erie County Care Management without a plan. So I just worked with Charlie Barber and, brought the community stakeholders together, and it took us these last 10 months to carve out a plan to get it. But I said, you know what? We're not going to we have a building that houses nearly, 200 plus. Our chronic homeless number is about 150. So how are we going to have a building that has showers, that has beds, that has televisions, that has washers and dryers, that has a commercial kitchen, day rooms? It's a secure facility. It's warm, it's dry, it's heated, it's got running water. We've got all the amenities to house people. How in the hell do we have people sleeping on the streets? To me, it was a travesty. And after the days of COVID and work release shutting down, it's been vacant for 4 years. And I said, this is not happening again. So again, that's the beauty of having an executive strong government where you can take a stand and you can make things happen. And this is a prime example of how this government can work when, it works appropriately.
So but just to be clear, is it duplicating what we're hearing from the build?
Absolutely
Or is
not.
it in line with as a partner?
I've coined this as the Streets to Stability Initiative.
Okay.
So what that means is you have what the health folks, Hammett Health Foundation, these other folks are doing with the Housing First model.
Right.
That's long term. So you've got to look at this as kind of like, on a continuum. You have folks that hit the streets, you have shelters, and then you have this here and now and this intermediate time period for these unhoused folks where it's like, well, where do I stay until I get into a long-term sustainable housing position, apartment, a house, whatever it is.
And we've had these overflow winter shelters that I thought that maybe this was taking that.
So that
deal,
is
right?
so that is so all the
our
father's
place, whatever.
So all the our neighbor's place. So all those overflow shelters. What this does is this alleviates the pressures on the volunteers. So now it doesn't have to shift, and there's a lot of damages to the church. The volunteer force is getting older, and they'll spend a week or two on the front end and a week or so on the back end cleaning up. And so it's a ton of work for these folks,
sure is.
where we can kind of develop a system where it's easier on the end user, the unhoused folks that need it. It's consistently in the same place. We can provide all the resources, but we're also hoping to get more church volunteers and more folks that just anybody. You don't have to belong to a church if you want to volunteer, as long as you can meet the clearances and all the other good stuff, and maybe take a couple trainings or whatever you got to do to appropriately handle folks so you know what to do and how. I think that we can actually get more out of this. And you look at like some of the issues that surround our downtown. You have the MHA, the Mental Health Association. We funded a remodel for their building. Where you notice down in the mornings, there's all the unhoused folks, and sometimes they're not even all unhoused. They're just folks that live close, but they look a certain kind of way, and some people feel that's maybe a little offensive or a little invasive or what have you. It's not really great for business. So that's a lot of the pushback from the business community. So what we did is we've allocated some DHS funding to help them remodel, build a nice green space, get them off the streets, make those folks more comfortable. But then all of that isn't so much as in people's face in traffic. It doesn't look like downtown Erie is full of unhoused people when the vast majority of those folks are actually housed. They're just there for mental health services and dealing with other issues and conditions. But it's all part of a continuum. It's a wall-to-wall battery of our unhoused, getting them from the streets to long-term sustainability, whether that's mental health, drug and alcohol treatment, workforce development, whatever it is. Some folks can re-enter the workforce, and we want to help them get there. For those that we can't, we want to find sustainable housing for them so they're not in the street. So, what we're doing is we're working with all of these providers. And, that's the beauty of this Resilience Center. It was very important to me when this idea kind of came about, is I didn't want any one entity to own it. You know, like this is the county owns the building, but we want it to be flexible. We want to have drop-ins for the different blended case managers. We want to have different drug and alcohol available. We want to have different services. We want to have different medical services available. We want this to truly be a one-stop shop where these folks can go and focus on getting themselves to being sustainable as opposed to shelter to shelter to shelter to shelter. The data shows, best practices show, you will not shelter your way out of the unhoused population. We can't do it. You know, I put another $1 million in my budget to support that, raising this up to $2 million. That includes the development of a tiny home village, which, you know, there's going to be some parameters. You're going to have to go to school. You're going to go have some kind of job. I mean, there's going to be parameters. We're not just giving free places to live. Like, you take one step forward, we'll help you with two. But I mean, there's accountability, and I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's going to come with this, you know. I mean, it's not just a free ride. So developing these tiny home villages will help get a lot of these folks off the street, teach them how to budget. And, you know, there's no one size fits all for any of these folks. It's different for everybody.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, that's why this blended case management and this oversight is so important.
I want to get quickly through the last couple of points here of your budget. Investment in childcare, $500,000 for home daycare improvements. So this is different than, you know, the larger institutions. You're saying you want to help those mom pop daycares that maybe have 6 kids or whatever.
So
right?
So let's talk about this. So we all remember the tragedy that happened to those 5 kids that died in that fire. You know, and the reality is, I mean, typically for our lower income earners, our new Americans, folks with language barriers, you know, they don't feel comfortable. You know, they have cultural barriers. Either they don't feel comfortable, the transportation limits them, the hours of the day limit them with their work schedule. I mean, there's a plethora of reasons, or they just plain can't afford to pay a commercial daycare sometimes. So to them, you have to look at some of these. You have to look at some of these childcare providers. You know, there's a lot of ones that are flying under the umbrella. You know, these are folks we want to help kind of come in out of the fold. You know, get licensed. You know, be able to install maybe childcare monitors, cameras. You know, doors or gates to basements, prevent falls, or down decks, or maybe fences along busy streets, or, you know, maybe there's water leaks in the house. We don't want the kids exposed to like mold and lead and these different things. So there's a plethora of programs available, but this is to augment that. That's to elevate the quality of the childcare for these in-home providers. So one, not only does that benefit the children, it helps the parents feel secure that, hey, you know, you can click on your phone, you can see your kid in these centers. So, I mean, there's a little more security there. But there's also an opportunity for that stay-at-home mom that's like, hey, listen, if I take these trainings and I do these things, here's some income now that I can earn. You know, so
to be part of the solution.
It's a part of the solution
child
to
care
crisis and the workforce. You know, I mean, so if you can get single parents, and predominantly you look at this, really afflicts lower income, minority families, new Americans, those with language and cultural barriers. You have to really look at the data. So, I mean, we're looking at that. And, I mean, it's not to say that we'll make investments in places like Union City, Quarry Mill Village, wherever it is.
Right.
Because it's the rural communities, too. I mean, you live out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, you live out in West Springfield. Good luck finding, you know, and maybe we can encourage these things along to where now you've got a rural solution for a mom or dad or a hardworking family to be able to make ends meet and get both people into the workforce and make it affordable. So, I mean, really, this is it's definitely an outside of the box solution. It's just the ways that we look at things. I mean, I didn't come here to play the game. I came here to change it, and this is one example of that.
I've just got like a minute or two left with the county executive. You're mentioning that you want to greatly reduce or change travel policy quickly. What's your thoughts there?
So, I mean, my administration, so the folks under my charge, we were able to reduce the travel costs by 20+%, reduce them just by efficiencies. I mean, when you're talking hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year across county government. But, you know, it's the other thing. I mean, the folks that aren't under my charge, you know, the different branches of government, I mean, their travel costs have gone up, you know, 29% on average. So, I mean, that's a 50% difference of what we're doing by implementing these travel policies. So, I mean, these folks, I mean, that's what I'm going to have to work across the different branches and get these folks to, you know, kind of tighten their belts or maybe reduce the travel or follow the same travel policy all of our employees do. You know, if they're not willing to do that, I mean, there's probably going to be some line item cuts in the coming months, or just not authorized payments for things. You know, you don't want it to come to that. But, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, if you've got an event where 4 folks can travel to Harrisburg and they can carpool with a county vehicle, and it costs the taxpayers $80 round trip. You should do that as opposed to letting 4 people drive individually and then claim mileage at 62 cents a mile. Well, now what could have been $80 is like $2,000. You know, and I mean, that's how I've been able to drive my costs down. It's not so convenient all the time for the employees, and I get that. But at the end of the day, we're here to work. We're here to provide a service, you know, and where we can reasonably save some money, that's what we're going to do.
I've got 30 seconds. I have to ask you about with the tranching of the grant money that comes from the county portion of the gaming revenue. Where does that put some of the folks that, you know, have kind of really relied on that gaming revenue?
I've been real clear about this. I sent out a letter 2 years ago, and I told them to expect a wean off of that. You know, I mean, we incrementally reduced a lot of those folks. And I mean, things like the Humane Society, the Anna Shelter, I mean, services that wouldn't benefit the communities by cutting, we left. Our libraries, we left alone.
Yeah.
Our AAAs, our senior centers, we left alone. You know, but I mean, there's a lot of like feel-good stuff. There's a lot of nice to have, but not need to have. And to me, when you can't get an ambulance, you know, there's $2.5 million we invested in gaming revenue to support our ambulance service. When 40% of your county can't get an ambulance when and where you need it, that's a priority to me. So, I mean, it's all about priorities, you know, and we're done funding nonprofits. These monies for county gaming revenue need to benefit the taxpayers like we voted on the referendum in 2008. We all voted for it to lower our taxes. My administration is the first one to make good on that, and I intend to continue to make good on that from here on out.
County Executive Brenton Davis, again, the hour went fast, sir. Appreciate your time.
Good to see you.
You've been listening to The Joel Natalie Show, Erie, Pennsylvania's daily podcast from TalkErie.com. Subscribe to our show on your favorite podcatcher and get involved by emailing Joel@TalkErie.com.